dear brothers and sisters, it is a great honor for me to be here, but particularly a great honor to be introduced by Anna Keenan, who sent me an email about 3 weeks ago, who said, just as we say to governments, it cannot be business as usual, those of us who are activists need to say it cannot be activism as usual as well, because clearly all our political leaders seem to be suffering from a common medical condition. And that medical condition is that they all seem to have a problem hearing. So we need to ensure that we can get more smarter, more powerful, more united, so that we give them no choice but to act with the urgency that this planet calls for right now to deliver a fair, ambitious and binding treaty by the time we leave Copenhagen in 2 weeks' time. I would like, though, to start by paying tribute to a group of young people that have inspired many of us over the last couple of weeks and months. And Anna, Sora Svensson, David Lowe, Matthew Ballet, and Deepa Gupta, if I can just ask you to please stand for a second and just wave your hands if you have energy still left in your body to do that. Can you? There's Anna. As an African, I communicate mainly by telling stories. So I hope you're okay. I'm going to tell a few stories. So I want to still stay with Anna, and I will tell you a story about July. When the G8 met in Italy, we had a meeting with Gordon Brown as a Tick 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 campaign. And as a campaign, we decided that oldies like me going there and saying the same thing we've said to them 1,000 times and they didn't listen, didn't really matter that much. That it was important that young people speak to the political leaders directly. And Anna led that delegation and wore a t-shirt that when Gordon Brown walked into the room, he stopped, he giggled, he laughed, and then didn't know what to really do after that. And the t-shirt said, "How old will you be in 2050? Now the significance of that t-shirt, which some of you are wearing, is simply this. The leaders are talking at the moment, they're very comfortable to say, we will set 80% cuts by 2050. But are not willing to commit to the midterm targets by 2020. None of them are going to be around in 2050 to be held accountable. It's easy to have long-term targets that they know they can walk away from and forget about. So right now, we have to be clear that one of our key demands over the next couple of days is to make sure that we enshrine in the thinking of every leader, every negotiator, that what we want is 40% reductions by 2020, and we want that to be binding. Let me go. Jersey, because I bumped into another colleague from Africa earlier in the day, and both of us were shivering, and he said, "Ish, where is global warming when you need it?" So I want to make some general points about young people at this point. For many of us who are adults, or we delude ourselves we are adults because we don't act as adults often, we often like to say, young people are the leaders of tomorrow. But I want to suggest to you that is not true. That when I look at my continent, where every single day, 6,000 men, women and children are dying from HIV/AIDS alone, when I look at the fact that we have 12 million teenage-headed households, because both mum and dad have passed away as a result of HIV/AIDS. And when these teenage-headed households, these teenagers are having to make life choices for the remaining younger siblings, then we have to say to the political leaders of the world that young people are not simply the leaders of tomorrow, they are the to ask you to cooperate with me a little. I've got a time restriction now. You can clap for everything I say. But basically, the adult world, when we look at young people, generally we look at them as half empty rather than half full. What I mean by that is we don't look at the potential that young people have. So we look at them more as what they don't have, how they need to be helped, the problems they have, rather than seeing the real potential that young people have. And let me be quite clear about the climate crisis right now. Our planet has never faced the scale of a challenge that climate change actually represents. And when we have a problem like this, we need fresh thinking, to look at the world through young people's eyes, to look at the interests of those that will pay the price or will benefit from the wisdom of what happens in the next 2 weeks here in Copenhagen. And so part of what we have to be thinking about is how do we ensure that we think about the quality of democracy, how young people fit into democracy. We should also begin to open such questions as whether in fact the voting age should be brought down from 18 to 16 to give more young people a real stake in determining who their leaders are, because clearly we're ending up with a very bad results in most of the elections around the world. Now, the problem we have is that too many of us have lost faith in our political leaders. And I will put this in a slightly funny way. There's an email that is circulating in South Africa at the moment that talks about President Mandela passing away and going to heaven, and St. Peter meeting him at the pearly gates and saying, President Mandela, what an honor it is to have you come to heaven. Let me give you a personalized tour. And after a few minutes, Mandela says, St. Peter, why are there so many clocks all over the place? And St. Peter says, well, you see, every time, for every human being on earth, we have one clock. And every time they tell a lie, the big hand moves once. So Mandela was quite interested by this. And St. Peter says, oh, come, I'll show you. We have a special room called the high profile room. So he goes into the room, he says, well, there's Madonna's clock. That used to move once every hour. It's slowed down recently. There's Mother Teresa's clock. As far as we know, it hasn't moved at all. There's Mike Tyson's clock. That moves still every 5 seconds. And after a few minutes, St. Peter said, but, you know, surely President Bush's clock should be here, because, you know, he's one of the most powerful people in the world. And St. Peter said, you see, we used to have this clock here,